Okay, we have a ruffle piece here, and you'll see on the pattern that it says to extend, this what this little squiggly line means, extend this to 44 inches, so that we need a 44-inch bias ruffle. Now, I'll tell you that my sister and I actually did all of your biases for you by making a continuous bias strip because we had to do so many yards. And the best way to learn how to do that method is to go to YouTube and Google or look up your continuous bias strips. And the best lady that we found was from McCall's. She's from McCall's Quilting. And if you look at her video on continuous bias strips, you will learn how to do that. And that's only, of course, if you're making the dress again and need this much bias. We have cut continuous bias strips for you, so they're already joined. You'll have at least one join in this, and then we're getting ready to establish the length and the way you have to join your length. So it calls for 44 inches, okay, we have a ruffle piece here, and you'll see on the pattern that it says to extend, this what this little squiggly line means, extend this to 44 inches, so that we need a 44-inch bias ruffle. Now, I'll tell you that my sister and I actually did all of your biases for you by making a continuous bias strip because we had to do so many yards. And the best way to learn how to do that method is to go to YouTube and Google or look up your continuous bias strips. And the best lady that we found was from McCall's. She's from McCall's Quilting. And if you look at her video on continuous bias strips, you will learn how to do that. And that's only, of course, if you're making the dress again and need this much bias. We have cut continuous bias strips for you, so they're already joined. You'll have at least one join in this, and then we're getting ready to establish the length and the way you have to join your length. So it calls for 44 inches, so I put this in half and I measured out 22 is right to here. So I move this pin down just a little bit. Now, what we don't want to do is just cut this off square. We want to join it on a diagonal. And in order to establish this, and you're going to need to do this on yours as well, we're going to fold this back on our 44-inch mark, and we're going to lay this over like this for now. And that shows us what direction to cut this diagonal. We're still back to our 44 here, so we've got 44 inches of bias. So with the stripe, it makes it again easy because this has the fine stripe of the file. I'm going to cut right along here, following the marks on the file, the stripes. And then I'm going to ditch the piece underneath. This is extra. We don't need that. Then I have to join this. So we've already got one join, so we know that this is going to be on this side. So where we've cut, we want it to end up like that. If you just take it and match your ends like that. And we'll put in a pin here and another pin here. And probably best to put in one more in the middle so nothing goes wandering in the middle.
I mean, you're joining I guess we'd almost call these miters.
Yeah, it's something
mitery.
like a miter, yes.
I mean, this is a great way to stretch fabric if you're doing a dress and you have some just long strips.
Strips, right.
And you need to have some embellishment. This
Yeah.
is a great technique to
Yeah.
have to put it together.
Let's see. Let me get my needle back out, which I think I'm going to have to rethread. In red,
We're going
of
to
course.
have to rethread.
Yes.
So I get to see your little machine.
The little machine work one more time here. Remember, the end coming off the spool is the one that we want to thread through the eye of the needle. So that's this one. I'm going to lay it in here. I'm going to push down, and I don't think it threaded because it did. It surprised me. Usually you see a little jump, but that one threaded just fine. And then you pull the loop out, and now you have your thread
I'm going to
again.
have to get one of those.
Oh, they're just a lifesaver as far as I'm concerned. Now, of course, you are going to be using white Orfil thread for your stitching on this, but I'm again using red so that you can
And
see
they have to source their thread.
Yes, they do. There are two sources that I've been using for my Orfil. One is the Doll Artisan Guild now is carrying a nice line of sewing supplies, including the Orfil thread, the fine needles, the nice pins. That's a new thing for the Guild, and it's easy to source from there. The other place that I buy my threads is Red Rock Threads, and if you just Google that, Red Rock comes up, and they have every color imaginable, and they sell all the weights, the 80 weight, the 50 weight. I don't go any thicker than the 50 weight for my threads, but you can buy all of your colors to match anything on Red Rock. So that's the
Sheryl,
my
you've been
go-to.
a longtime member of the Doll Artisan Guild.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people out in the world that don't know anything about that organization.
Ah, true. It is an organization of essentially doll makers who I've been a member since 1979, actually, right? Almost at the beginning of the Guild. Because I wanted to learn to make dolls. I really love dolls, and I did not know how to do it properly. So I joined, and it has a wonderful magazine, and we get together for our little events and conventions, and I also teach classes through the Doll Artisan Guild, both doll making and sewing, because I'm a doll artist as well as a costumer. So anyway, it's a great organization, and they've got a nice website, and they are adding a lot of sewing-related kinds of items to their website now. It also tells you about all the conventions and events and seminars and about our instructors and that kind of thing. It's kind of fun to go look at.
And anybody could join it.
Anybody can join it. Actually, we have collectors that have joined it.
Because you have a beautiful
We
magazine.
have a beautiful magazine, and also information about antique dolls in there, not just dolls to reproduce, but we do a closer look, which goes through a complete costume on antique doll, and other things of interest.
So you really don't have to be a doll maker
No.
to get
No,
some
definitely.
pleasure out of
Exactly.
joining it. And even if you don't know how to sew, if you see something you like in it, you could certainly pick up the pattern and have
Yes.
someone make something for you.
That's right, because
So
they're wonderful patterns.
What
in
is
there.
what is their web address?
It's dollsbeautiful.com, I think it is, or .org. Oh, I should.
Dollsbeautiful.com or .org.
Yeah.
Google it.
Google it. Anyway, it's Dolls Beautiful is the name of our magazine. That's why the website is Dolls Beautiful. Okay.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that because it's a very nice organization and they need more members. That's all.
Always.
organization.
Every organization, I think, in the doll world needs more members. But it's a really, really lovely group of ladies, and I've worked for them for a very long time and continue to support and enjoy. So. Yes.
All right, back
Take a
to
look.
ruffles.
Back to ruffles. Okay. So now we're going to do our running back stitch at 1/4 of an inch here. So, and I'm using the stripes to follow along very easily.
So you're already starting into ruffles already?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we're joining our ruffle into a circle so that we can then put our gathering into it and our top stitching and hemming and all that kind of thing. And then it will adorn our underskirt. It's what's going to peek out. Well, it's being difficult. Okay. Peek out under the overskirt, which is the same fabric. This is the same fabric we'll be using for our overskirt. And
I think they're going to enjoy this fabric because
it's so nice to work with. It's cotton with this lovely little file ribbing in it.
perfect scale.
Yes, it is. I felt very fortunate to find such nice things to work with. And of course, I mentioned how nice the silk is to work with, but the cotton is wonderful as well. Very easy to handle. You can see the needle pierces it very easily. So I'm just that back.
And you're not doing tiny stitches.
No,
you're doing...
I'm not. Not necessary. They're going to be reasonable when we turn it over and look at it, but they're not going to be tiny, tiny, tiny. And I love the fact that the rib gives me a guideline for sewing. I don't have to measure anything. I can just follow the lines here. Oops, get it lined up here. Of course, you could have taken this to the sewing machine and done this in a little bit faster, but
they can do it if they want to do that.
If they want to,
they can do that if they.
Yes, I use the machine, for a lot of my straight things like this. I don't like to use it when I'm doing curves, or when I'm applying trims and that kind of thing. I like to do that by hand, but for your nice long stitches or long seams, it works beautifully. And I use the same thread on the machine that I'm sewing, my hand sewing. I've got ruffle on my machine as well. So we get to the end here, and I'm going to give one more back stitch to tie this off. Don't have to worry, the seam is not going to have any stress on it. So the only thing we're going to need to do is press it open. And again, for the purposes we're doing here, I'm just going to finger press this for now. And then we're going to put a hem in it. So that's what it looks like there. That's what it looks like there. Look a little neater if it was pressed with the iron, but it's not bad. It finger presses well. So now you have a continuous ruffle in bias. So we're going to take then, and with my pins and my measure, I'm going to trim off this little tail here because we don't need that getting in our way. I'm going to take and turn this up first a quarter and then a quarter again, and then I'm going to put a pin in it.
So that's like a total of a half an inch.
It's a total of a half an inch, but you can just, and if you're questioning the quarter, pull out your little ruler and measure it. I've done quarter-inch things for so long, it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, you know.
I know what a quarter looks like. Or for our international audience, 6 millimeters. So.
I'm glad you know that because.
Well, teaching in Europe for so long, I needed to know that.
Yeah, you'd have to.
I did. I had to know that. I couldn't tell you a lot of other measurements, but 6 millimeters and a quarter of an inch, definitely, I can tell you, is what it is. See, you don't have to make it hard. It just turns up pretty easily here.
Well, I mean, that fabric is like working with butter.
It is. And you don't want to pull it and stretch it, because the deal with bias is it does really stretch, and you'll see that when we're working on the bias around the neck edge. You'll really see how stretchy it becomes. But here we don't want to stretch it because it would make the ruffles stick out at the bottom in a very odd way. So.
I think you're getting a lot of a very exact turnover when you consider that you're doing this on the bias.
Yes.
I mean, so this is a good fabric for this
Yeah.
concept. I know some fabrics that this would
not be cooperating. No. Yes, there's nothing like the pleasure of working with really nice fabric. That's
When I was very, very small, my aunt, my youngest aunt, worked in a tailoring shop. And she worked for a Swiss tailor named Mr. Marchand. And after school, I would go and hang there.
Yeah.
I never had a, I look at it now in my life and think how lucky I was. I never
Yes.
had a babysitter that wasn't related to me. They were always my family, my aunts, my grandmother, people like that, cousins. But I would go and be with my aunt who was working in this tailor shop with this old Swiss tailor who was really, really, really old. He was probably my age. And Mr. Marchand. And one day I was making a little doll dress, and it was in cotton and it had an interesting pattern, and I decided that I was going to embroider it and bead it.
okay.
And Mr. Marchand taught me something. He said, never do expensive work on cheap fabric.
Good point.
And that
yes, stuck with
me.
you forever.
And the other thing I learned, which kind of really makes sense, is that whatever the cost of the material is, there we go. Whatever the cost of the material is, you charge 7 times the cost is your.
Oh, really?
cost.
Is your cost base? Huh.
And it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
If you put 20 pounds of beads on a dress, it's probably going to cost you $10,000.
Exactly. I'd trim out that little.
But I never forgot that. And
That's
I think it's
good.
very sad when you see people that have really a lot of talent and then they put it into cheap
Right.
material.
Okay, this one I'm going to jump forward and get the seam down and then come back and put my pin in this other place that isn't down yet.
So this we really do need to pin this part
Yes,
down.
this is not one that you can just work along with. You really do need to pin this. I feel a lot better about it pinned than free-handed. Yes, I'm afraid fabric is truly one of my weaknesses. There's nothing like handling really beautiful things. Yes. I can't seem to resist. It's just hard to pass up.
Well, I mean, for what we do, you know what? We can't pass it up because not everything works for what we
Right.
do. So
That's
we
right.
have to, when we see it, we have to do it.
Yep. True. Almost there. And then we're going to slip stitch this this ruffle just and the hem just exactly like we did on the striped one.
Now, Sheryl, if they didn't join it before they do all the ruffling and all of this, and they decided to join it on the actual skirt, Is that not going, that's not going to probably be correct, is it?
It's not, it's going to be difficult. I mean, this is really easy to have joined this into a circle now. It would be difficult to do that manipulation and get your angles right on the dress. It's so much easier, and it's going to look neater as well, because then all your seams are going to be on the inside like they're supposed to be, laying like they're supposed to be. So I would not recommend joining the ruffle on the garment. I just wouldn't do it
And I
like
think that you probably would get, you would apt to get it very evenly distributed when it's in one piece.
Yes. Well, the thing when we finish hemming and we start on the top, we're going to be turning down and doing gathering stitches. We're also going to top stitch this when we're finished hemming. Is that I'm going to teach you to quarter this on the skirt. So we're going to quarter the skirt, we're going to quarter the ruffle, and we're going to pull up our gathering gently, just like we did on the cartridge pleating, where we're running the threads down the fabric. And then we will quarter it on there and then adjust our gathering in between and then continue to pin it the rest of the way in place.
I think that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, quartering is really important because then you know that you've got equal distribution of ruffle. And this ruffle was not one that is super full. It is a nice fluted ruffle that's going to sit on the end. I didn't want something that was super gathered or it's going to stand out like not what we want it to be, like a tutu. And we don't want to do that. So let me just throw in a couple of these, the start of the gathering. I mean, of the hemming, sorry, not gathering, hemming. I hope you're appreciative of the red thread. It just sort of jars me to be doing this. But,
well, I mean, I think it would be very hard for the public to see this.
To see this on the camera without it. So then I'm going to tuck my tail back in there. Just take a touch from the front.
I mean, white, we would
be losing. It would look like
we would be seeing your
nothing.
hand.
Yes, doing something, but
that's not really.
Yeah. So it's just a pick of a thread from the front.
The great thing for you, Sheryl, is they can stream this into their television and they can see your stitches
right.
magnified.
And my hands.
Yeah.
So,
you've got great hands.
Well, thank you. But so that's this. Now I'm going to turn this over because we don't need to go through the entire hemming of this skirt, but I wanted you to see that even in red, there's very little that you see on the right side.
If that were white,
you would never see it.
No,
never, ever, ever.
So I mean, I wouldn't stress that.
Yeah, doing that.
That would just be. It would just blend in.
And so you're probably thinking, well, why didn't she just turn up this hem and top stitch it on the machine? Well, easier said than done. It's hard to get this exactly arranged so that when you top stitch, it's going to set right on that hem and catch all of this. Because I found, even when I was top stitching, that sometimes my machine went off a little bit and then it'd come back on.
And then you have terrible
And then you got to tear it out.
Yeah.
And you'd also have to baste all of this in place before you ever did it. So why not just hem it and then take it to the machine? You don't have to worry about it when you do your
And then
top
it's very
stitching.
secure.
Yes, it is. So then that's the hemming part, and then we'll continue after that. We're hemming this ruffle, the cotton ruffle, and I've just finished all the way around the 44 inches. So you can see the red thread is showing a little bit of the slip stitching.
Little flea bites.
Yeah, but look at how beautiful that hem went in. It was absolutely gorgeous.
And of course, if that were white,
you wouldn't see anything.
No.
So that shows you what we're going to do with that. So that's ready for top stitching when we get to that point. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our ruler and we're going to turn it down 3/4 of an inch to the wrong side. So this is the wrong side because you can see the hem on it. This is right. So we're going to take this and we're going to turn this down 3/4 of an inch here, because that's going to be the top of our ruffle. So I'm just going to turn that down, pin it, and then we're going to take it to the machine and we're going to gather it by machine.
Your little measure is really handy.
It really is.
Now, where can
Oh, Joann Fabrics, they have these every
have
day.
this? Okay.
Yeah, or any quilting store, or, it's a very standard, I think it's Dritz that makes them, sewing gauge, and it's a very standard thing. But it's something that when I first learned to sew, I learned to sew with this, and I've used it ever since.
Well, it's small enough that it just works.
Yeah, and I like the fact that I can set the width, and then I don't have to think about it or even read it. It just falls in right where it's set. So when we get this all pinned in place, then we will take it to the machine, because we're going to machine gather it, and we're going to top stitch the bottom, and we'll be doing this in red, and this is on purpose in red because remember our red stripe underskirt. This is to pull that together so that
So this is a decorative top
this
stitching.
is a decorative top stitching. We're going to use a little bit longer stitch length, because I like a longer stitch length on the top stitching. It makes it look a little more elegant. Okay. We have our ruffle prepared now with the bottom hemmed and the top turned down, and now we're going to top stitch the lower edge on the machine. Would be difficult to top stitch by hand. I mean, it could be done, but with difficulty. So we're going to sew this with a little bit longer stitch length, because I always think top stitching looks better with a little longer stitch length. And we're just going to sew around. This just adds a nice pop of color and picks up, of course, the red in our stripes.
And you're sewing it right on the fold line.
As what I did was estimate where I thought 1/4 of an inch was here, and that's where I'm sewing. So,
okay. And you'll notice the little nubbies; those wouldn't show if you did it in white.
If it was in white, you would never see that.
So visualize that they're not there.
Here we are, all the way at the other side.
It's the simplest thing we've done all day.
It is. Okay, now let's see, I didn't bring scissors up here. There's no cutter on this, is there?
There should be.
Is there a cutter?
There should be somewhere.
Okay.
It's
Oh,
my
I see
oldest.
it.
It's my oldest friend. I don't.
Yes, yes.
But I'm not used to being on
You're
this
not.
side of it.
Right. So now.
Not very often, by the way, public. Does anyone get up here to see this space?
To the secret place
The
at
secret
the Grovian.
place.
At the Grovian.
This is where everything happens.
Yes. So you can see where I have run over here, and I'm not going to want to see that. So I'm going to pull the threads back till it just meets. So I'm going to take and
You're just going to pick it out.
I'm going to pick it out until it's back to, I think I'm going to pick it out.
Yeah, it's coming out.
Is it? Maybe we'll try the back, though it's easier to pick out the red than it is the white. So I used white on the back of this.
And we did that just because it was in it.
It was already in the machine,
Yeah,
and I didn't
and
have
this
to
is
do
just
it.
For example.
Well, let's try this end and see if this, yes, that's going to come out much easier. There we go. I'm going to pull that thread to the back, and I'll just keep working this down until those threads match, which is not going to be very many stitches before we're back to square one. Somehow it doesn't want to come out very easily tonight. So anyway, we'll just pretend that those came back to even, and if I worked on this long enough, that really would happen. So the next thing we need to do on this is to put 2 rows of gathering at the top. And I'm going to establish this at 1/4 inch for the first row of gathering, and then I'm going to come above it so that we get a good bit of ruffle here. So I'm going to guess that that is about 1/4. And I'm also going to lengthen the stitch length even further. And that's a better stitch length. Again, don't sew over the pins.
Oh yeah, that one.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I was first learning to sew and my mom was supervising that she said, you can't sew over those pins. And I said, just watch me. I can do this. But I broke a lot of needles, and it also makes a bump in your stitching line. So I learned the hard way.
Well, it's particularly with these old machines, they're not easy to I mean, it takes a lot to break a needle, but when you do, it's a lot of work to change it.
Yes.
This machine has been with me since I was 12 years
Whoops,
old, so I have had it a long time.
Yes.
It cost a whole $15.
Did it really? That was a good deal.
Well, I think that was it was not real money then.
No.
But
And did you buy it yourself?
I don't know how I've managed to have it all this time. There's so much from that time I don't have. Somehow this has been with me.
Well, it sews beautifully.
Once a year they go to the spa. All of them. There's quite a few in the room. And we have extras. There's quite a few because we have extras if something happens.
Okay, so I'm not sewing over the previous stitching.
You're just up to it.
I am going right beside it.
Ah, okay.
Okay, because you don't want to leave a gap there. Okay, so I'm going to pull my threads down so they're out of the way, and then I'm going to do the stitching above it. And I'm going to be using about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on this one. So that's going to be about right there.
There you go. That's the speed it likes.
Yeah.
These are great little machines.
They are. I actually just bought one for the first time because
once you get used to this, you won't use anything else. You know, unless you're doing all these wonderful, you know, embroidery things that they have today.
I don't do that. Nope. Not my thing.
This just does what you need it to do. And these all have cases that they fit into, so they can just pop out of these tables and travel
in their cases. Yes. Okay. Now we're going to stitch up that skirt, so I need to rethread it.
So we're going to go from the ruffle to the skirt.
Yes.
All right, we'll be back.
Good. So in order to get this ruffle, which we prepared, onto our striped skirt, because this is going to be the bottom of this, first we have to quarter the skirt, which we will just do with pins, like that, starting at center back, center front, which of course we already know because of our nice basting stitches here. And then we'll fold that in half, and that will be our quarters. So we'll put a pin here and a corresponding pin on this side. So now we know where that ruffle is going to set, but we also have to quarter the ruffle itself. So we'll do the same procedure with that. We start with whichever end you want it to be, and put a pin here, put a pin in the other end, fold it like this, put your quarter marks here and here. Now, one thing I wanted to mention about these ruffles, these were all cut on the bias, and because I had to do so many for the kits, I used a technique called making a continuous bias strip, because I had to make dozens and dozens and dozens of yards, which is really not easy to accomplish. So this is something that you might want to learn yourself, and the best way to do that is on YouTube, is there's some excellent tutorials on doing this. So you're going to find that when you pick up your ruffle out of your kit, there are going to be multiple seams in it. First, we've got the seam that we joined when we made a circle out of it, but you're going to find other seams here as well. Now, virtually the way that they're done, they're nearly invisible when they're on your doll, but don't be alarmed when you find either 2, maybe 3, depends on when you're doing your continuous bias, how many seams happen to come in your strip when they were cut. So I just wanted you to not panic about that. That is to be expected.
And that, Sheryl, that is an absolute common technique, commonly found technique that was used on Herre clothes, people's clothes. It's a common technique used in upholstery.
Yes.
I mean, this is how you make strips.
Strips, right. And what you don't want to do when you're doing bias is to make a straight down one. This is not what you want to do. No. You've got to be doing these, joining your diagonals together. That is required. So it might be easier to think you can just do that, but it'll never lay right. I mean, if you even look at the fabric, it'll lay beautifully with your diagonal join, but it wouldn't if it was just a butt up together join. So I wanted to do that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our thread and we're going to begin to shear it. Now, what I do, like we did, I think, someplace earlier here, when we were doing the gathered skirt on this, no, on one of them. Anyway, I hold the threads with my hand, and I use my other hand to manipulate the gather. So I am working my gathering down the threads. I'm not pulling with this hand. I'm gently manipulating this fabric
into your quarter space.
Right. So we're just going to have to continue to work on this until we have the whole thing. Mostly where we're guessing will be our gathers, because the only way you'll actually be able to tell is when you put it up to your quartered skirt. And you're going to find, like many times when you're doing ruffling, you don't want to do, the classic modern, 3-to-1 or 2-to-1 ruffling. Generally on antique dolls, they are not ruffled that much. So you're going to find that you've got
We don't
a more
want it to look like
gentle-
a tutu.
Exactly. So you've got a more gentle kind of ruffle like this. So let's try it and see how close we are to our quarter here. So I'm going to start at the center back. And here's our mark for there. Oh, center front, sorry. That's the center front, not center back. And I'm going to place it so that this is just not sitting here, but just over the edge so that that's covered. So here's our...
Just a smidgy.
Yes, just a smidgy over. And see, we
There's
are...
no measurement for smidgy.
No, there isn't a measurement for smidgy. And you can see that I still have to pull just a little bit more. Pull that shirring just a little bit more.
So this is something you have to work at.
Yeah. And go slowly. For heaven's sakes, if you put all this gathering in, you certainly don't want to pop the threads. I mean, that's really disappointing.
And
So-
if you're working with a bigger doll, because they could be working
Yes.
to dress it however they want, they can use the ruffle to make up for, make it a little longer if they want.
Yes, right. So we'll
I
try
mean,
it
these
again
costumes are
here.
designed for the 15-inch
Right, the
puree,
15-inch,
but,
yes.
But it can go on anything
Yes.
they want.
That's right. It can. It'll fit a number of dolls in the same range as that. Just, I would say, always check your bodice by doing that on a scrap fabric to start with. Make sure it's fitting correctly and make your adjustments. And then check the length of your skirts and the waistband. Very important.
Fitting, I think, as you go is...
Yes, exactly. That is the word. Okay.
Measure twice, cut once.
Right. You can always take it off, but you can't put it back. All right, so then I would just pin this in place.
Now, this is going to look different in the finished product because you're not going to have the red
You're
top
not
stitch.
going to see the red top
the
stitching
top,
here.
but
No,
you're gonna see it
this
at the
is going to be
bottom.
white. You're going to have your top stitching down here on your decorative here. That
And
is
the
going to
decorative's going
coordinate.
to be prettier too because you're not going to have the little...
Right, the little
nubbies.
picks of the red from the hemming on the back.
That's not gonna show.
Exactly. So that's the idea with this. And then I just take my needle and thread and I just tack it, which
This
means...
is a great idea, Sheryl, because if you take a big, ruffle and you just start doing it without quartering it, it's pretty traumatic because that's a lot of... How long of a piece of ruffle is that before it goes...
This ruffle was 44 before it came down.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of ruffle.
That's a lot of
to do.
ruffle. So quartering it really will...
Really helps. And in fact, if you were doing a much bigger circumference skirt, I'd do more than quartering it. I'd eighth it so that you've got closer marks to work in.
Sure.
So that when you're doing your shirring of your ruffle, you've got a better idea of the placement. And so you don't have a lot of shirring in one place and very little in the next. You really want it to be looking equal
And
as it goes
usually when
around.
people run out, they run out at the back,
True.
which is where you don't want to run out.
Yeah, right.
And that's where you want to have more ruffle
Yes.
if you
Okay.
have to.
So I would just be, of course, doing this in white thread, not red. And I'm just going to tack every once in a while down here. You're not having to secure this on like it's not like forever, but it's not.
So you can do bigger stitches.
Bigger stitches and for a little bit further apart. But it's going to maintain the ruffle in the position you want it to be.
And you manipulate it as you go.
Yes. So obviously, we're going to need to shear that whole ruffle before and get it placed on your quarter marks before you start sewing it down. But just for demonstration purposes, this is the technique.
And then
Okay.
there's going to be a trim over
No.
No. Oh, no,
There
there's
is
not
no
a trim.
trim. No.
Oh, you know what? I was looking at the finished product, and I thought it had trim on it.
No, it's not.
No, it's just a
No.
pretty little
It's just
ruffle.
It's just
Okay.
the ruffle. No trim whatsoever. Okay. So we have finished the ruffle on the underskirt, and we are going to we're going to start constructing the overskirt. So we pulled out the correct pattern here, which says overskirt, and this kit has all you need to do that with, which is your file, your cotton file, your waistband again, and these pieces will be the tabs that hold up. Wrong picture. Hold up the overskirt. This is what we constructed already, our striped underskirt with the ruffle. Then this is the overskirt here. And because we're playing croquet and we need that dress out of the way a bit, the women started putting tabs on them and pulling them up so that you could see your feet, because you've got to get this mallet down here to get to your balls to get through the hoops. So this was a very popular style. When you look at old croquet pictures, there's many of them with this pulled up overskirt. It's very charming. So that's...
Sheryl, would you call that an elevator skirt?
Well, I don't know if that's called an elevator skirt or not. That's a good question.
The way it's
pulled up?
I think it may be called an
Maybe
elevator
it
skirt.
is. Okay.
A fashionista out there will let us know.
Well, let us know for sure what the right term for that is. Yes, but what it does is takes the stripe from here, and we pick up that on the tabs, and then when we get to the bodice, of course, we've got binding and we've got ruffles as well.
Well, it's just plain old chic anyway.
It is. She would be a stylista, fashionista on the croquet ground. So, and that was an important thing, by the way, for the croquet, because it was one of the only times that men and women could socialize together in a, quote, athletic event and be very respectable. So
Really? I didn't know that.
yes, it was a way of putting women and men together in a very casual, not sitting in the parlor and having to, do your tete-a-tete, but you're outside in a,
Physical activity.
A physical activity together, and men and women, it was very acceptable. Started in the late 1840s. Was when
really?
croquet.
Okay.
Yeah.
What country of origin is it?
I think it came from an existing game that was played in Europe. I don't believe this was a U.S. kind of sport at all. And then it became wildly popular and then spread all over. And it's a lot of fun to read the history on croquet. But it's newer than I thought it would be. It's a game from the late 1850s. So we're into the 60s now. So it's fairly new at this point.
Sure, it's probably
still hot, really hot item. Yes. Okay, so enough on that. But that explains what's in here. So let me talk about the patterns and putting the patterns together first. So we've got 3 patterns for the skirt. And I've got it divided into an upper and a lower. So this is where we're looking at the overskirt back upper and the overskirt back lower. So I just fold that down on the joining line, match it up here like that, and put tape on it so that we end up with a piece like this. So we'll do that to all of the pieces. You'll have to cut and join those pieces.
And the reason we do that is the paper is
not long
big
enough.
Yes.
Right, exactly.
I mean, they could essentially take a piece of tissue paper and lay it over it.
Right, if they
could.
wanted,
They
sure.
could.
You could do that. Of course you could do that. But this is what I usually do. I just fold it and tape it and then cut the whole thing out together. So we're going to be using my prepared pattern pieces. And we're going to again slide this out of the package so that everything is together like that.
And remember, don't open your package until you're ready to use it.
Until you're ready to use it, because then you may be missing pieces, which they were there to begin with, I can tell you that. So here's our waistband we'll set aside, the label, and these are going to make the 4 tabs, and we'll go through how to do that. But right now we've got to cut from this piece of file your skirt, your overskirt pieces. Now, if we look at our pattern pieces, this is not on the fold. This is not on the fold, but this is on the fold because this is our center front. So,
And it says center front
and it says,
fold.
right, and it says fold of fabric right there, okay? So let's set that up first, which is gonna be like this. We're going to fold that back. You're going to be very conservative with your fabric here. I give you enough, but I'm not one for wasting fabric, so you're going to find that my layouts are pretty close. So don't just be putting it in the middle and starting in. You've got to lay it out properly. So that is the layout on that.
Any scrapped fabric should be saved for other projects.
Absolutely, especially this, because this is not easy to come by. So then I'm going to pin in a few places. I don't overpin these, but just in a few spots here, so it's not going to go anywhere.
So do you cut out one piece at a time? Is that...
In this case, I'm going to lay everything out first, make sure it fits and works correctly, and then we'll cut out.
Because you only really have one...
You got one piece of fabric for this. So, okay. So now we know we need a cut 2 on this, and we need a cut 2 on this one. So we're going to fold the rest of this over to here again, so that we're there. And this one I'm going to put right here because this fabric has no really right or wrong, and up and down makes no difference. I'm going to utilize the fabric this way.
And we're running the stripes up and down.
Up and down.
The ribs and the
exactly.
file.
And if you were to buy the fabric by the yard, it doesn't run that way. It actually runs across like this.
Oh, right.
So I had to reverse it to get my stripes running the right way.
Right.
On some fabrics, you can't do that, but this one is no problem to do that with. So
they really don't have, there's no margin of error here.
No.
If they don't cut this out right, then
that's it.
That's it.
You're done.
Yeah.
So
they'll be calling you.
I hope not. Please listen to what I'm saying so you're not calling me. Now I've got grain lines on all the pattern pieces, of course, except the fold, because the fold has its own grain line. That's running straight grain down. But here are your straight grain lines for these other 2 pieces. And in order to line those up really properly, in order to line those, you take a tape measure and you measure from the tip to there, which measures about 10 1/8, and then you measure from here. Whoops, it just moved. Let's secure it and then remeasure it. Still the same from here to here, and it should measure the same from this point to here and this point to here. That means it's going to be on the straight grain. So we're gonna...
Because we don't want it wiggling.
No. And we don't want it hanging in a weird way. That's why straight grains are really, really important. It was one of the things that, one of the very first sewing classes I took was in the 7th grade, and they were really big on straight grains and measuring. Okay, this one, again, we're going to measure here and here, which I'm going to turn it just a little bit to make it match. We've got exactly the amount of fabric up and down. We'll put a couple of pins in, and then we're ready to cut. So I wanted you to really understand the layouts, and don't think you can do it another way because it's not going to fit. I can guarantee you that. Then I'm going to take my scissors, and when you're using a scissors, you want to keep it as flat as possible to your cutting surface and sort of slide it along so that you're not up in here. This makes the most accurate cutting like this. Okay, we'll set that one aside and finish our front. So I can keep it flat while I'm cutting. Finish the top. So there's our cutout. And now we will match the notches and pin it together so that we can take it to the sewing machine and zip up those seams really easily. So I like to start with the back because this is marked with an opening here. So this is open all the way down to the dot. So I end up putting my first pin right there. It's going to indicate that I'm not going any further up than that. Then I'll put pin down here, a pin in the middle, and that's our first seam. Then we might
Which is the back seam.
Which is the center back seam, yes. Then we'll go to this, because here's our double notch here. We'll take our pattern off.
These are the side pieces?
These are the side pieces, yes. And this pattern was designed for those tabs, so I had to make the side pieces a little larger so that they would accommodate from the front to the back. That doesn't make any sense now maybe, but that's why the pieces are so different in size. So now we're going to take and open that piece out, and we're going to match our tab here, and of course this seam gets sewn all the way down. And again, it's always good to be working flat because it's easier to make things lay right and match together easily.
Well, I love your board. I think that makes a nice
Yes.
surface where your arms are kind of in the right position rather than reaching out.
And again, we'll be sewing with 1/4 inch seam allowances because that's everywhere unless I state it somewhere else, you know, a different seam allowance. But basically 1/4 inch seam allowances work well for doll sewing. And then our last
Particularly
piece, this size,
scale.
yes, yeah. So now we'll finish up with this one. But I'm going to need to trim this off just a little bit. That's a little alteration I need to make here.
Well, the good news is this is all going to be gathered up too, so it'll be
It's going to be pleated.
pleated.
This one is pleated. I tried doing a cartridge pleated skirt just the way one would think you would do it, and it was too much bulk. So I really looked at the whole costume and said, okay, how can I get the width around the circumference on the bottom I need, and get the rest of this around the waist, where the two cartridge pleated skirts did not work. So I cut these on the A-line so that it's smaller at the top, gave me the width at the bottom, and then I pleated the whole top. So the pleats lay very flat, and you'll see a lot of pleating in Herre costumes. I mean, this is single pleating, double pleating. This is a combination of box pleats and knife pleats to give the fall, the drape of the skirt, to be able to put the tabs on and pull it up. So there was a lot of manipulation to get to this point. So now we're ready to go to the sewing machine and sew. Okay, so we pinned all of this and matched all of our notches together. Now we're going to start, I like to start on the center back so I don't forget to leave the opening up here. So we're starting here, and I always back tack just a little bit before I start. And then we'll pull that pin and go forward. There we go. There we go. Okay.
You just got to get used to that foot pedal.
Yeah. Okay. So there's our back tack on the bottom as well. And then, where is it caught? It's caught somewhere here.
Sometimes I turn the little kicker, and that helps it.
Okay, so again, we're going to be sewing with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Going to make a small back tack before we start, and then continue.
And we've done all quarter
1/4 inch seams. Yeah, 1/4 inch seam allowance, which I was just obviously guessing, but
I think if we measured it, it would be a 1/4
I think it would too. I think it would be very close to that. Okay, and I always, you notice I'm sewing from the hem up to the waist on a curved, not curved, an A-line seam like this. It seems to lay better if you do that rather than go top to bottom. So I'm always starting the bottom to the top on the stitching.
There's nowhere to go but up.
Yes, for sure. Only 2 more to go, and we'll have this.
It's not, your technique of taking the pins out, it's not that big of a deal to do it.
It's not. And I think this is the last one.
Well, Cheryl, I'm giving you an A+ for working with a machine that you've never worked with before.
And didn't break it. I would have been in big trouble.
You wouldn't have been in big trouble, but it works.
It does. It's just getting the hang of the whole
Well,
thing,
hang of
especially the
someone
foot pedal.
else's spot.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
not mine, but occasionally they let me go there.
Okay, now we need to go down and press.
Okay, we will press.
So we're pressing all the seams open. And then the other thing I'm going to do is cut the notches off at this point because they've served their function, which the function being that they were to match up the proper skirt pieces together. But we don't want to see those after this. So I like to get rid of them about this point. So we're going to sew. This is our back seam that we left open, the 4.5 inches down. So we're not only going to press the seam, we're going to press it all the way up to the top. So that's going to be our opening. And then we're going to do a herringbone stitch on this to keep this down. And that's really fun to do. I love doing herringbone stitch, and I'll teach you how to do that.
I'm looking forward to learning.
Yeah, so it's a good way to keep things in place without a lot of bulk, and it looks really cool when it's sewn anyway, so, and it's fun to do. We need to open that up. Okay. And then, of course, all of these seams need to be overcast in your spare time, in front of the television.
Yes.
Or listening to books, whatever. Okay, so that's our pressing.
A lot of seams.
It's a lot of seams, but look how lovely they look from the outside.
Oh yes, it's beautiful.
Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous.
It's a luscious fabric to work with.
Yeah, it is. It's pure pleasure. Now, the very first thing we're going to do is you're going to get out a piece that looks like this. And it says Overskirt pleating template. But just like our skirt pattern, we have to join the pieces together. So this goes joined to pattern 2. This is pattern 1, pattern 2, pattern 3. And it says that you're going to cut this here and you're going to tape this here. And then you're going to cut this here and you're going to tape this here. And we end up with one very long pattern, which is going to go all the way around your skirt. Pattern 1. Okay, so this is pattern 1. We're joining this to pattern 1. This says to 2. This is joining to 2, so we know that that is the piece. And we're just going to tape that in place. Okay. Then we've got join to pattern 3. This is pattern 3. That says join to pattern 2. This is pattern 2. So you're going to have a pattern pleating template that's going to go all the way around your skirt. Okay, so we've got that ready to use, but we don't have this ready to use yet. First, we need to do the little trick about identifying the center front. So we're going to fold this in half, like this. There's our center front. I've got to mark it with a few pins so I can get my basting in the right place. Then we'll open this back out. Take a needle with not very much thread, but it'll get us mostly there. Make our knot. I'm going to start at the top. Okay, so we are marked again and with our pins that are marking the center front, and we're just going to run a long basting thread so that that remains in place for reference, so that we know that we can always find our center front, and especially in pleating, we're going to need to know that, as that's rather critical. Irregular stitches are fine, it doesn't matter, and of course in color, because you want to be able to see it.
Really, the most important is really the top, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Though on the ruffle, which we're not ruffling this, but we were ruffling the other dress, that was important on the placement of the ruffle as well.
Because you're quartering that out.
Yes,
So you need
that's
to-
right. And we don't knot this off or anything. We just leave the end so that we can just give it a pull at the end and be done with it. Okay. So we are there. Now we're going to get our little ruler out and a lot of pins. And we are going to find first the center front on this pattern, because it's going to be exactly the same going one side and then going to the other. So it makes a lot of sense to just to start here and work to the edges. Now I'll tell you that pleating is the hardest thing I teach. Regardless of how I've tried to simplify it, it's the one concept that people get hung up on. And the biggest hint, as I can tell you about pleating, is to relax. Because if you get uptight and too precise, it will drive you positively nuts. Where if you just relax and let it happen, it happens, and you come out with a really nice result. So,
We have a nice fabric to work with here, too.
well, we do, which really helps. And when I do a pleating diagram, I mark the fold of the fabric with a solid line. I put an arrow in, and it's where that fold comes. So, for example,
Follow the arrow.
you follow the arrow. So you fold there, and that's where the first pleat is, right there.
Could you fold that all up in paper so that they can see the concept
Yeah,
of that?
Yeah.
Because that to me would be much more easier to just
to follow, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a fold, and it comes to there. Next fold. Comes to there. Now we're at a box pleat, and I say here, this box pleat is centered on the seam, which means it's going to be sitting right there. So we're going to fold then this way
So
to
that
make
means the
that
center of the box.
box pleat is on the seam. And I didn't want to put another line in there because I thought it would be confusing, but just stating
It's not confusing. It's very,
okay, so there. And this time we have a little inverted pleat here. And now we come to another box pleat that is centered on this seam right here in the front. Let me just get rid of this paper back here. It's not gonna fold right. Okay. So here's our box. Then it's gonna fold here, come to there, fold here and come to there, and now we're to the center front. So with all of this folded up, this is going to be
half the skirt.
half the skirt.
Now, honestly, Sheryl, what you did is much more difficult to do it with paper
Than it is in
with
fabric. You're right.
So I think that maybe our students should do this first in paper just like you did it and get a feeling, because it's so easy
It
the way
is.
you've done it.
If you follow the fold lines, and I've listed fold on every fold line, and the arrow goes to the placement of that fold, which is a broken line. So if you just get that concept of fold, follow your arrow, come to the broken, that's it.
And with the paper, they can do this and just sit and do it until they get it right.
Until they get it right.
And then go on to the fabric.
Right. And then if you look here, you see you've got your center front, which is going to have a little pleat here, a box pleat on the seam, a little pleat here. Then you start basically the repeat again, where you've got the little pleat just like here, except these are coming together, so you have an inverted pleat right there. Then you've got your box that's sitting on the seam, a little pleat afterwards, and this is the seam allowance, which obviously is going to be to the back.
All right, well,
Okay.
we'll be back with a finished product.
Okay. Okay, so we've been through the folding this and getting this pattern piece so we understand how it goes. Now I took it back out, and now I went to measure to get myself started. So here is our center front. We've got our center front marked here. So I went from the center front to my first fold line, which was 2 inches. And that's what, if we could take this out and re-show you here. So we went from here, center front, to the fold. I put my pin in at 2 inches. I folded that back to here, because this is our broken line, is our fold line, which is about 3/8 from the center front. Getting this lined up so that the stripes in the fabric really do line up with the edge of the pleat. So we're right there, and I'm putting a pin in place like that. Then if we go to our next pleat, it's the box pleat, and that one is centered on the seam. So we know that that pleat is going to be centered right there on that seam, and this box pleat is about 1 inch. So if I could put my 1/2 inch mark here on the seam, go over to here, mark the edge.
They could use a pin to do this, but it seems yours is fairly easy because they're going to have to measure it out to pin it anyways.
Yeah.
To use a pin.
You know,
a chalk or
right. When we were sitting here chatting, I just sat without the pleating diagram. I took a couple of measurements, like this was my first one. I knew that this was 1 inch, and then I came over here to the end, and I worked my way back, and I just did it.
and it's beautiful.
And it's just exactly the way it's supposed to be. And then I could firm up that I had it right, because this measures 4 inches from the center front to the center back.
And that's what it's supposed to be.
That's what it's doing. Exactly right. So then I used the other side of the pleating diagram, so it's center front this way, and I repeated it. I started with my first pleat here, then I went to my box pleat, then I jumped over here to the end, put this pleat and this pleat in, here's the box pleat again, here, and then work my way back. So that's how I found it was easy to do. When I didn't at the first time come up to my 4 inches, all I did was take one of the pleats and I just adjusted. I put a little less in the back, giving it the same thing in the front.
You have to work with it.
You just have to be relaxed and just think about how this is working. And just if you need another 1/4 inch, you make it work give yourself another 1/4 inch. There could be less behind, there could be more, more in the front, but you just have to relax until you get it so that it measures 4 inches on each side, like that.
But I think play with it first in paper.
Yes.
Folding the paper, I think that makes it so much easier
It does.
to get the concept of it.
So then the next thing I'm going to do is secure these plates. So I've basted the pleats all the way, except I've got to go back and catch that one because that one's coming out. So if it's all the way across, using this as our guide, measured it out to make sure we were 4 inches from here to the end, 4 inches from here to here, and then we're ready to put on the waistband. Okay, so I promised how easy this was going to be. It's going to be a fairly standard waistband. If we look at our pattern, we've got a little bit that's going to hang over the edge. So we're going to just allow, and that gives us a spot for our hook and eye when we're hook and thread loop when we're going to put it on. So I like to have that little bit on the end. So I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to find the center front of my waistband and put a pin there, and then we'll match that to the center front of our dress, which is marked, of course. So, and this particular fabric does seem to have a right and a wrong side. If you can't feel, but I can feel for you, that you've got sort of a satiny side, and this is right here. You can feel it's got a little more sheen to it than the back side. So we're going to want to put this on the skirt right sides together. So this satiny piece is going to be our right side. So we're going to start by taking our center front, matching it to the center front, and putting our pin right there. Then I'm going to work my way to the center backs. So I'm going to have our 1/4 inch overhang on here, and this is right on your pattern that this is where this is going to sit. So you've got a 1/4 of an inch sticking out, extending, not sticking out, the side of the skirt, which is going to be coming back in here to finish the waistband. Now, if you look here, we've got a little bit of extra. It seems like it's too big, but actually we can work that in really, really easily just by kind of pushing on it and getting it worked into place.
Curvature.
Yes, so.
Working that curvature.
Yeah. So
It's a perfect fit.
What looked like it wasn't going to fit is now going to fit like a dream. Okay, so there is your fit here. So we'll go to the other side, and remember we're going to back this off so we have a little extra overhang. So we're going to have a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here, but we're also going to have a little bit of an extension. So it's going to look like that when we pin it on. Then the same amount of extra we have here, we will just ease it in and work it in until it all fits. And probably one more pin here is needed. Okay, so now we've got our waistband on, our pleating in the back, and we're ready to sew. So this is just going to be, could be done on the machine, but we're going to do this by hand. So I'm going to come down a 1/4 of inch seam allowance. I'm just going to do a running back stitch here, just like we've done on the other ones. So we start out like that, of course in red, so that you can see the placement, see the stitches, all of that. Remove the pins as we go. We're just going to do this. And we've got quite a bit of thickness with the pleats behind, so my stitches may be a little bit longer in order to accommodate that. But there's your back stitch, and then another one forward, and another one back, like that. So So this just proceeds along until we make sure we have a 1/4 inch from the top, until we get it sewn on. And then it'll just be a standard roll over the waistband to encase the raw edge and slip stitch it on the back. So it's going to be very quick and very easy to do. Okay, so we've sewn on our waistband. We've got it flipped up. Now we're going to turn it to the back, and we're going to take our 1/4 inch down here, and then we're going to fold it all the way down to where we attached it, like that. And put a few pins in.
This fabric's so manageable, you don't really have to press it to get to what you want.
But we still have to believe in pressing. It's really important.
But you'll press it after.
You will press. Okay. And this is the one with a little bit extra on the end here for accommodating the hook. So we're going to take this and fold this back our 1/4 here.
So that's a 1/4 inch fold.
Mm-hmm. And that still leaves us a little fabric hanging beyond. So when we close our skirt, it will look completely closed up there. So it's looking like that. So you've got not a 1/4, it's a scant of a bit of a 1/4 there. And
it just has to be enough to accommodate the hook.
Right. So we're going to do this one and fold it back here, fold it down here. Put a pin in. Like this. And then as I'm looking back here, I'm going to myself, well, I never did teach them how to do the herringbone stitch, so I think we still owe them that. So there's your waistband looking like that. We will just slip stitch this in the back like we've done our hems. It's exactly the same procedure. So we're going to start by running the thread up the fold like that, like that. Hiding our knot. Whoops, I hit it for sure. It came all the way out. Pulled a little bit too hard. Okay. Get our knot hidden in there a bit. Then we just start down the side like we did the last part of the last waistband. Just sliding in the fold, coming back across and out. Come down to this corner. We're gonna.
And all those stitches are giving this some stability.
You're right. Now I'm going to take this knot and stick it back up into the seam allowance. Probably be easier if I got rid of the pin to do that. Yes, it does really add a lot to the fabric, to the feel of the fabric when that happens. You stitch onto it. Whoops, we must have one of those nasty little loops which will pop back out. And of course, working in red, everything shows. Totally everything.
Well, this is just for the class.
Yep. Yes, Michael said a few minutes ago, he said, well, just think you'll have a whole new costume finished. And I said, in red?
Yes. Oh, well.
Yeah, oh well. Yes, it's all cut out, but all the stitching's going to have to come out and done properly. So we just continue across with that and doing our slip stitching so it's all finished. So now the only thing left on this overskirt is we have to hem the bottom. We're going to do that exactly like we did the red one. We're going to turn it a quarter and a quarter, and then we'll have to make the little tabs that pull up here for our pleating.
So refer to the red hem for
Yes.
this
Right.
segment.
So it's exactly the same as the red hem. So,
And that was some really good techniques for doing
yeah.
that. So they can watch that.
Yeah.
And when they come back,
it'll be all hemmed and-
It's going to be magic. It'll
Yeah.
be all ready for them to look at.
Yeah, and then tomorrow we'll have to make the tabs. That's the last thing to do, but I've got really good instruction on that. So we have to make the 4 tabs and put those on, and put the little buttons on with the little X across it.
Fun part.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back
Yeah.
later.
And we're back here. I just wanted to show you, I did finish the application of the waistband so that wrapped around our raw edges and then was a slip stitch down the back. And I did that in white. You can still see the red thread from the previous basting, which needs to come out. So the important part now, I'm going to show you how to do the herringbone stitch. And I want you to see what that is. I've started it here. And this is a little crisscross, very, very attractive, but it serves a very, very good purpose in that it keeps this seam flat. This is our back opening seam, and it's important to have that flat. So you do this by, I started, under the seam, here's our seam allowance. Maybe see that on the camera better, on the back opening. So I started underneath, and then I go from side to side. So it's crossing over from the seam allowance to the skirt, and we're just picking up a thread like that. And then we are just crossing over, down, going, your needle's always going up to pick up the stitch. So it's up, the thread out of the way, up, oops. Got to rethread here, I'm sorry about that. It slipped out. And it did it. We just pull the loop, and we're back in business. Okay, so little stitch up, little stitch up, little stitch up. And you can see it just makes that whole thing lie flat so that it's almost invisible on the back.
It's very decorative, too.
And it's very decorative as well. But it's a
Utilitarian and
very utilitarian stitch that I use not all the time, but when I want a place like this where I want it to be flat and not come up on me.
And if it were in white, it would just
It'd be totally invisible.
But yet have a little...
Now, if you look closely, you'd see your little X's on it.
So you go one way, and then you're going to go back.
And then you're going to cross over, and I'm going to take this thread under here, and you're going to go up like that. So the needle, just always remember, the needle's always going away from you. It's going up on this.
This is used a lot in undergarments.
It is, yeah. And if you see really beautiful couturier work, it's used a lot in couturier sewing. Not that that's equivalent to this, but it's a stitch I like to use in this kind of application where I want to keep that down. If you looked at the other side, you can see this is going to flop around even if we overcast it, as compared to this side where it's going to lay completely flat and stay that way so that your back opening doesn't have any of this gapping back here. Okay, so that's it. And now the other thing I wanted to show you here is that I did do some of the hem on the bottom. So you could see it's just like the other one we did. We rolled a quarter and a quarter, and then I just slip stitched this down. But this then is the finish. So the only thing left to do on this overskirt are the tabs that are the pull-ups, which we'll do. The last thing, well, actually, we've got two little things to do to finish this overskirt, and then it will be done. So we're going to be doing the little striped tabs that hold up the skirt so that you've got your overskirt pulled up so she can hit her croquet balls and be able to see it. So I did a nice, not only pattern, but totally the illustration on how it works. So we're going to start out with the pattern, which is here. I've cut your tabs already in your pattern, so you've got those. The first thing we're going to do is fold over this bit here, then we'll fold over the 1/4 inch, then we'll fold over this to the back, and then we'll slip stitch that down. So we're going to do this.
And if they don't really understand how to do that in fabric, they could do it on the paper.
Oh, you could do it on
pattern.
the paper and just follow fold 1,
Yeah.
fold 2, fold 3.
It's a good way to
get into it. Now, when we're finished with this tab, because we have the advantage of the striped fabric, we want to have, when we're finished, we want to have 3 stripes down the front. So that's why the folds are done the way they are. So let me just quickly pin this and I'll turn it over so you can see the stripes running the way they're going to be centered. And each one of them is going to look identical, of course. So we're going to... So this is fold number 1 that I'm pinning in. So when I turn it to the right side, you're going to see the red stripe running down that edge. Then I'm going to do fold number 2, which is a 1/4 inch, and then this whole thing is going to wrap over so that we end up with free stripes down the front.
with a red in the center.
Yes, with a red in the center, and then our button will be centered on that. So we're going to get this.
So it's important that they really pay attention to this, or it is going to look funny.
Exactly. It is going to look
You don't
very
think it matters,
strange
but it
if you have it off center.
Stripes are a pattern, people.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of wonderful things about working with a pattern as far as, but it really should be mirrored, I believe. If you put that on the costume wrong, you'll notice.
Yes, it's going to be a very prominent feature that's not going to look right. So we don't want to have that. We want it to look perfect.
And actually, the back side is very decorative too.
Yes, it is. Okay, so we've got that. Come on, Silk, cooperate. Folded and pinned. Just confirm that the other side is looking good, which it is. It's all matching up. And then we just slip stitch that in place. So we're going to run down here with slip stitch, and you're not going to be catching to the front. You're only going to be catching this other side of the fold. That's one of the things that's purpose is that it allows us to go in there and just catch that piece and not go through the front. So if we went through the front, you'd be into the middle stripe, and you don't want to be in that now.
So this they can do a fairly loose.
Yes, it's
fast stitch.
It's a fast stitch that just secures the back in place. Just a little deeper. There we go.
I mean, once the attendees have this kit, they could take the pattern and they could make a whole croquet team.
Indeed.
Uniforms. They could do the blue team, the pink team,
Right.
the black and white team,
The yellow team.
yeah, they can do the
Yes.
whole thing.
As my croquet set has all of those colors. It has the primary colors and the mallets, which and balls. They're all done to match. So
Now, just the different balls, are those different
they belong to different teams.
teams?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so you really follow the color of the
Yeah, you could color
You could,
coordinate,
you
I guess,
could.
your costume to the what mallet you're carrying, or mix it up. But come on. There's nothing like trying to sew in front of the camera, I'll tell you. It's not so easy.
Not only do you have the camera in front of you, it's in your eyesight.
Yes, you're right. Oh. Yeah, it's not even like demonstrating for somebody. It's
Well,
and
you're-
it's fast.
And you're demonstrating for plenty of people.
I think so. All right, now we'll go to our tab construction after the original folds. So the first one is we're going to take that corner and we're going to bring it over to that seam line like that. So what we're looking for is to make a point out of this.
And you do it just like the
And
diagram.
exactly. You just follow the diagram. The next one comes down like that. And then on the front, we want that centered on our stripe like that.
So the point is the center stripe.
At the is the center
So
stripe.
that's almost your guideline.
Yes. So then we will just take our needle and thread and tack it down here. And then, of course, the last thing we'll do is go up and top stitch the edges so that it becomes a decorative unit. Oops, that thread does not want to fall in. I'll just get rid of it. So it doesn't want to cooperate. Okay. Then on your pattern piece, you're going to find that there is a mark, an X, on your pattern piece that shows where the tabs are attached.
And that will be on the pattern piece.
It's on the pattern
of the
piece itself
overskirt.
of the overskirt. So yeah, we're maybe a little off center here, but anyway, that's the idea of that point coming up the middle. Then we will be top stitching.
We're a little off center.
Yes, we are. But hey,
this is demo.
This is demo stuff. You know that yours is going to be perfectly
has to be.
centered here. So we'll top stitch up here, across here, here, and then down, just like the illustration. And then when we get our buttons out, the tab is going to be attached, actually. Let me clip my thread here. Under the skirt, and each of the tabs is on the seam line, so that's where we'll be pulling up. So this is going to be sewn after it's completely finished under here,
Under there and flip
under
over.
like that, and it's, like I say, it's marked right on the pattern. Then you'll just take this and give yourself a couple little pleats this comes up, and your button
And
is
we're not
there.
sewing those pleats down. They're just
No,
loose.
they are loose, and you'll just kind of manipulate the fabric to get them to lay nicely, because you'll
And this, Cheryl, they fit this on the doll when they're doing this.
exactly,
So
exactly.
you do it how it looks.
So it looks
chic
right,
on the
right.
doll.
Yes, there's no. I just say pleat the bottom, and that is just the way the fabric lies the best. It's going to lay in a certain
In a natural way.
In a natural way. I can't really tell you exactly. It'll be an inch here and a half an inch there, but you'll find out when you start doing it. So that's
And if they pull it up too
just-
hard,
yeah,
it'll look
it'll
like
look
she,
really funny.
It'll look
Yes.
like she has a flat
Yes,
tire on.
yes. And I have to also say that the tabs are placed lower on the two back seams than they are on the front seams. So
That
that
makes
you've got
total
more
sense.
pull up in the front than in the back. But it's, so that's, when these are top stitched, then you'll just go to your marks on your pattern, place those, pull it up, and then when we see the dress, you're going to see that there's a nice 4-hole pearl button that sits here, and you're going to make an X right across the middle of the button.
And you
So-
can do that with some chalk or something.
No, you're going to do it with thread.
Oh, no, when you're putting the button on.
Yes, when you're putting the button on, you're just going to X that. When we get further along, and this will be visible, I will show you that X. It's simple. It's just the way you sew it. And I do it twice. I sew twice on the X to give a little more color. So that's part of the addition to that. So the only thing left now on the skirt is going to be the making the bar for the hook. And I do want to demonstrate that because this is the way I do it. We will pretend we have a hook here, a single hook. Use a small hook. The ones I really like the best come from Doll's Parts. They're small and
Specifically made for doll clothes.
yes, they are. But so you've got a hook here, so you've got to close it. So then we will make the bar by going in under here.
And bars, some people call loops.
Except it's not truly a loop. It truly
Yeah, I
is
guess
a bar.
I
Yeah.
guess.
Okay, so I'm going to estimate that that's going to be right here. Usually it kind of lines up with this seam here, or this edge. So I come up from the back. I go across like this. I come up to the other side. And I don't pull it down tight, but I do pull it down flat. Like that. And then I do it again. I go across and down on the end.
And stab stitch.
Yeah. And then I come back up just a couple threads over where I went down. So. And then I'm going to do the tacking across that bar. So I'm going to hold the thread here. I'm going to put not the eye, I'm putting the eye of the needle, not the point, through here. So you're coming through the loop. And I'm going to pull it that way, snug it to the right. So it's the eye of the needle going through, because if you tried to put the point of the needle here, you'd always catch your thread. And then you pull it.
It's almost like a macrame stitch. Isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So
This is really easy.
it's simple to do.
And
And it looks, and it's strong, and it looks so nice when it's finished.
And it's historically correct.
Yes.
I mean, many of our teachers do this technique, and they just do it. Each one of you do it in a different way.
Probably. There's
So
many ways to
there's
do
no
it.
wrong way.
No.
If it,
This is the Sheryl bar.
this is yes. But I like the way yours is very easy.
Yeah. You know, there's ways to chain stitch it and that kind of thing, but I find this is so fast and it works so nicely that I always go back to essentially blanket stitching over my threads. And you come out with a nice,
Curie clothing is not over buttoned or over hooked.
No, it's not.
Because
No.
those hooks, they cost money.
Mm-hmm.
And they cost more money in those days than they do now.
Oh, I'm sure.
For
because they were probably all handcrafted at that point, not run through on the machines. So, okay. So now we're to the end here, and I'll just end it by going to the back like that. And you can see this, if I can get it from the side, you can see this beautiful little bar.
Nice.
Okay.
Perfect scale.
Yeah. And we just take a few stitches on the back and knot it off, run the thread in the waistband, and trim. Okay, so that is the bar, really nice looking bar for your hook. And of course, I would have tried this on the doll to make sure how far I need to go over to do that. We're just making it here as as demo, but always when I'm sewing,
Yes.
I'm fitting.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
Yeah, you have to do that. You can't assume
That- no.
any pattern or any...
No.
Because one little thing goes wrong and it could not work.
Even your seam allowance difference, if you're taking a little bit more than a 1/4 inch or a little bit less than a 1/4 inch, the fit is going to be totally different. So it's really important to construct and try, especially waistbands and bodices. Those are the tricky ones. Okay, so as soon as our tabs are finished, this piece is finished and we can go on to the next. Here is our finished product. Let's lift this up and you can see now, here's all the cartridge pleating up here. Here is the application of that ruffle on the bottom that's been top stitched. In the real one, we did the top stitching in red, but we did the gathering in white so that it disappears. And you can see how the ruffle is gentle. It is not sticking out. It's laying just beautifully here. And then we've got our overskirt finished. We've got the elevator, Michael tells me, elevator skirt, where this is coming up. You can
Allegedly an elevator
Okay, so anyway, there's our tab attached to the back. It wraps over the file and comes up here. This has already been top stitched. And then we have the 4-hole button with the X stitching on it, which is also a little detail of trim, a little decorative detail. And if we turn her around, you can see that the skirt tabs are lower in the back than they are in the front. We're going to jump ahead and show you a little bit of the detail in the back because she has the belt we will be going through, but it comes down and covers the center back opening, tab lower on the side, back to the front. And you just have to play with the fabric to get it to pleat and drape the way you want it to. But it's very charming skirt, and I can just see her out on the croquet lawn, charming all the men because that's probably what she wanted to do. And
well, they're going to see her on the croquet.
They are. We are going to show her on the croquet
Absolutely.
court. Yes.